Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Rumcast. I'm Will Hookinga, and joining me in spirit right now for this quick little intro is John Gulla somewhere in Miami. This episode is part 2 of our interview with Mark Reynier and Jane Nurse from Renegade Rum Distillery in Grenada. So if you missed part 1, go back and check that out now. It's the previous episode number 74. Mark is the founder and CEO. Jane is the environmental compliance and public relations officer. She describes herself as the distillery's Swiss Army knife, so wears lots of hats. And in part 1, they took us through kind of the journey of building the distillery from scratch, planting hundreds of acres of sugarcane, all the many ups and downs, setbacks, surprises that happened along the way, and a bit about kind of their whole philosophy behind the distillery, behind their approach to making fresh cane juice rum that highlights terroir. Part 2 really goes deeper into the rum itself, and we get into some really interesting discussions of how the production process impacts terroir and spirits, you know, why they made the choices they did when it comes to yeast, distillation, aging, and all those variables that end up impacting what comes out at the end in the bottle. We also talk about what the next few iterations of aged rum releases will look like as they work toward releasing what is kind of their ideal of what they want their rum to be, and everything that the future holds. So have a listen, sit back, and enjoy. So, switching gears here, I think it's easy for spirits enthusiasts and rum enthusiasts in particular to see how different places can produce different cane juice, but then you get into what do you do with the juice once you have it, right? And that's where all these other variables can come in, from how you choose to ferment it, how long, what kind of yeast, how are you going to distill it. There's all these variables, and I think it's debatable, you know, how much influence each phase has. And Mark, as you were saying earlier, people have different thoughts on that. And then there's aging, which is a whole other thing. But what I wanted to ask is, how do you design a production process from the yeast you choose to use to how you choose to ferment it to, I know you have a column still, you have pot stills. How do you produce the spirit in a way that kind of maximizes or really accentuates the early stage, the agricultural part of the process? How do you see all those pieces fitting together?
Well, the Renegade Distillery was designed in Oxfordshire. That's where it started. That's where it at least started with, Booker Tate, and how, we could do this. And I can remember one of the first meetings we had with our engineers, FDT, who built Waterford. And we had the sugar guys, we had the engineers, and we sat in a room. And I remember thinking, the first thing I said was, we are not going to copy anything that's out there. This is blue sky thinking. Mm-hmm. We got the chance the first time to build a distillery from the ground up with totally new thinking. We're not just going to go, off the shelf. Here's a distillery.
You didn't want to look at like how Martinique does it or anything like that.
Nothing. Okay. Absolutely nothing. I've always felt strongly about this. I think if you start looking at what everybody else is, then you start getting it. No, you've got a vision. You know what you want. How are we going to achieve it? And so, this is blue sky thinking. So we started with the waste streams. What are we going to do on a pristine island where we're going to build a greenfield site? I've been around the Caribbean. I've seen what people do with the waste streams,
the waste
emissions,
can be a huge issue,
what goes up the chimney, and the vinasse or the dunder, or what happens after distillation. And I've seen, horrified at how this stuff's just dumped down into aquifers and put into rivers and streams and everything, and stinking the place out. So we have an obligation, a responsibility. That's one of the reasons we first talked with Jane, with her environmental background. Mm-hmm. How are we going to do this? We started the design of the distillery from the back. This whole project is upside down and back to front. It totally is. We had to grow the cane first to prove that we could grow enough before we could press the button on building the distillery. That's why we've been at this so long. When I first arrived, we didn't talk about this, but when I first arrived, I intended to replicate what we'd done at Waterford, what we'd done at Renegade, which is to, say to farmers, look, I want to distill your results. I want to, what you grow, I want to distill.
You weren't able to do that here.
No. Yeah. Because, because that revolution of 79 to 83 shut down agriculture. So there's a generation that just has no experience of agriculture at all.
I think it can also take a lot of trust as well. If someone comes and says, sure. I want you to grow this, and
They've barely seen a tractor. So not one, 3 years of trying, not one farmer said, yeah, you know what, I'm up for that. There was a lot of suspicion, an incomer, cane again,
like you were talking about earlier. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we had to be the farmer. And so we started a process, how much do we want to be here? This isn't looking good at this rate. So if we're going to do this here, we're going to have to be the farmer. We're going to have to get the machinery. We're going to have to get the ground. We're going to have to do it ourselves. So then started this process of trying to identify what ground can we, what flat ground, what, harvestable ground, cultivatable ground can we get? And so it started with, I think the first one we did was Hope, what remains of Hope Estate, and then Bacalet Estate, and then we gradually Westerhall, which used to be a distillery, and then round up the west side of Dunfermline, used to be a distillery, and then up to Pearls, up to Point, and then we gradually got the critical mass that it made it worthwhile pressing the button to build the distillery. Back to front, as I say.
Yeah.
So now we're building the distillery. We've designed it, again, back to front. We started with what do we do with the emissions up the chimney, and what do we do with the wastewater, which is a euphemism for binasse, wash down water, cleaning water, all the liquid that a distillery generates. And that's when we came up with the idea of the emissions was relatively simple. You just had to put lots of 4 systems in place to clean the emissions. So, that's an engineering solution. The wastewater, we need to sediment out the solids. We need to correct the neutrality of the acidity, alkalinity. We need to reduce the temperature. Then we can pass it through a trench system that follows the contours of the hill at 2 meters depth, a process called phytoremediation, where it percolates through the soil over a month before it gets to the mangrove as fish food. That phytoremediation process, where the roots and the root nodules of the plants and the trees growing above it clean, remediate the soil after the passage. Passage is a percolation. It's a hydrostatic percolation. So it's a very clever system, but it requires vision and it requires money. It's not cheap, and it requires care and attention and operation and planning. But it is possible. So our chimney emissions are a third of the World Health Organization Australian limit, and our vinasse is fish food.
One of the things I wanted to get to is, again, once you have the systems in place, you have the distillery set up to kind of be self-sustaining and everything. Once you have the raw material there and you begin the process of, turning it into rum, what influenced the decisions you made in terms of how do we bring out the taste of the terroir as much as possible? Part of the reason I ask is because we have a monthly happy hour we do with listeners of the podcast sometimes, and very organically, this past Wednesday night, they were asking us, who are some people you were planning to interview this year, and someone was like, "Hey, what have you guys heard about Renegade Rum?"
Yeah,
and I was like, "We're actually speaking to Mark and Jane on Saturday," and we started talking about terroir and everything. And one of the questions that came up was, if you're trying to capture that taste of, the soil, the area, wouldn't you use wild yeast, was one of the things that came up, which, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think you do. And to me, that doesn't negate what you're doing. It's a decision. And I just wanted to know, like, how do you decide, like, what else are we going to do in the production process to really bring out what we want?
Well, that's quite a big question there.
We just do the easy ones, the softball questions on the Rumcast.
So we talked about how we built the distillery. So we started at the back, the waste streams. I also put up a hand. I'm not trying to save the planet. I'm not some eco warrior, eco loon. I'm a pragmatist. I'm a businessman. I'm a distiller. I'm a natural flavor seeker, and it's entirely, in my view, a responsibility that one should have. That if you are going to come to this place, this beautiful place, you have a responsibility.
Yeah.
So let's get that clear. Secondly, as we move back through the process, it's a circular operation. You have cane coming in at one end. It goes through milling. It generates the bagasse. The bagasse we then feed into the biomass boiler, which creates the steam, which goes to the stills, and the juice that goes to fermentation. And then the fermentation comes to the stills, and then from the stills, it goes to the warehouse. So it's a very ergonomic setup. And that's how we designed the distillery. You can stand in the middle, we call it the grassy knoll, and from there, you can see the whole thing all around you. So, it's very, ergonomically, cleverly designed. So as we come back, the biomass boiler has to be fed this is often a problem that people don't understand with, renewable energy is, tail, dog, wag. So we have to feed very carefully, very precisely the biomass boiler, creating the steam, some of which goes to generate our electrical requirement, the majority of which goes to produce the steam for distillation. But coming back through the system, that feeding of the biomass boiler is controlled by the rate at which we mill. And then the feeding of the mill is determined by how far away the farms are and how long it takes to get the cane there and the rate at which we can cut that cane. So you're going right back to the front. Everything, our unit of distillation is determined by how much we can cut in a day. And that's 1.5 acres. That's 70 tons. That's our base unit.
Okay.
And so we can ferment that base unit, that 1.5 acres, separately. We've got what we call the wine rack. It's an innovative fermentation system set up, which uses 2 rows of 6 fermenters. They have a capacity, it's not what we fill them to, it has a fabricated capacity of 40,000 liters each one. We use at the most half of that of each. So that's something often people confuse. They think of capacities and that's the volume we make. No,
we
don't operate these things at
full capacity.
Right. Because you need headspace, you need all sorts. So the wine rack, which in itself was a construction nightmare, and that base, I won't even go into that. There's a video somewhere on the website.
More pain.
Showing you what happened. The difference between 7mm steel and 10mm steel. Let me just put it at
3 millimeters.
And a lot of heartache. So those fermenters, normally you'd see, any brewery, you'd see fermenters stacked like this. Yeah.
Next to one another. Yeah.
So in the Caribbean, we have here 30 degrees Celsius every hour, every day, 365 a year. All right. That, this is not the Hebrides of Scotland.
Right.
So tropical, a lot of heat. And we're dealing with sugar. And sugar and heat creates volatility. So when you ferment in a modern fermenter, vertical, you have all the conditions are right for an extremely volatile fermentation. That carbon dioxide, as you know, heat is generated, more heat, and you're generating carbon dioxide if you did that, it would be like Pepsi. So you can't temperature control that. It's too volatile. I want to temperature control. Now,
you're not seeking volatility.
Yes, but people need, what is temperature control? It's, you're not freezing the stuff. It's not, it's not
stabilizing. Yeah.
You're talking about 5 degrees Celsius.
Yeah.
That's all. It's keeping a lid on 5 degrees Celsius. So what is essentially the difference between 28 degrees Celsius and 33? That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to stop it going too warm. So it's like a blanket, right? But you can't do it like that. So if the idea we put in place was, if you put it horizontally, you've now got the headspace, you've got much greater surface area.
Right.
Therefore, no volatility at all. Now you can put a lid on that temperature. Now, why do we want to put a lid on the temperature? Because we don't want volatility. We want intensity of flavor, natural flavor, intense. Now, this came from Burgundy. Then when they worked out that if you took just leaving it to ambient temperature and actually intervene, like keeping that lid, stopping the fermentation curve going too fast, you get greater intensity of flavors, natural, pure, clean flavors. Now, these are self-contained stainless steel, so that we have to maintain. If you go that route, you have a whole different set of issues. Hygiene beat the biggest one. What we're trying to do is keep out the bacteria. We want to introduce the yeast, so we know that it's the terroir doing the talking, not alien introduced bizarre bacteria. So we use a yeast that has been bred specifically for sugarcane, right? So we are standardizing that input. So that cane yeast is going to do the same thing to everything, right? Exactly the same. Because I want the terroir to talk.
You're going for consistency of variables,
not
basically.
The yeast.
Right.
Yeah.
Precisely.
Not the yeast. Now, you've seen it in wine, you've seen it in New Zealand, how they propagated yeast specifically there. And it gives a very distinctive New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc flavor that you do not get anywhere else in the world. To me, yeast, and people ask me this about Waterford, why don't you play with yeast? I've got all the kit to do it. I can play with yeast till the cows come home. But that's like a big, broad, vulgar brushstroke. And I don't want that. I want the natural Akari flavors from the terroir. And I want to see them, not an introduced, broad brushstroke. So our whole fermentation system, which is without doubt the most important part of, in my book, of any distilling operation or any wine operation, it's the fermentation, is about how do we get the purity of flavor in. And that means excluding, because remember the heat, the sugar, the 30 degrees heat, we do not want the introduction of bizarre haphazard bacteria, because you then get a bacteriological nightmare occurring. Now, people say, but what about sort of, the traditional way? Now, that's a good point. And I've seen it, the dunder pits and the stuff that goes into them and the lime and all the stuff that gets added. I don't want to go there. I understand how it evolved and why, because there wasn't electricity. You couldn't do the temperature control that we're talking about. And so that was the only other way. You couldn't ship in yeast. You had to recycle your own. I understand that. It's what breweries used to do, when you had regional breweries. Fine, no problem. And that means, because you're not adding yeast, you're using indigenous, from that dunder pit, it's a much slower process. Yeah, very slow. And anything goes. Anything goes. There is and cannot be any consistency or very, very little. Not a problem. You're dealing with molasses, not an issue. All right, carry on. I just want to do it a different way. I want the hygiene. I want the control. I want the terroir talk. And that's because we're using sugarcane. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. And I think, to me, this is always one of the things that's been so appealing about rum is I can taste a Renegade rum and get that approach. I can taste a Rivers Antoine rum and get the other approach, still Grenada, still cane juice, more wild yeast, things like that. And you can see the differences. There's different perspectives. Sure. And I don't think any approaches,
right
more
wrong.
right or wrong.
No, absolutely.
It's a viewpoint.
They're different, and you can see how they evolve. Mm-hmm. That's sure. Well, we're talking about a modern distillery. A distillery. I'm not replicating what's been before.
Yeah.
I'm starting again. We know the science. We know what fermentation does. So this is that Burgundian Bordeaux Renaissance of the 80s. For rum, we know the science. Back in the past, they had to make do. They didn't have the technologies we have available today. There's also a certain romance about a natural yeast or natural wine. Well, to be honest, between us, I'm not a fan of natural wine, because what natural wine means is a hair shirt. I like wine with texture and body. So I want it to be made the normal way.
I don't think we have that many wine people in our audience, by the way. So you don't have to worry about about pissing anyone off.
I want it to be I want organically grown grapes. I want biodynamically grown grapes, and I want it vinified, in the simplest way possible. But to actually want the hair shirt, leave me out. I don't want a thin, holier than thou, but hair shirt approach. Well, so I think the thing with there is quite often with these terms a slight sort of misconception. A natural yeast, that sounds better than cultured yeast.
Right.
To a lot of ears, you think, oh no, that's much better having natural yeast. Having a cultured one that's actually designed and propagated specifically for the cane. No, that sounds like manipulated.
Well, it's like GMO doesn't sound so hot either.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. When in fact the reality is so far away. Now to put another hat on, okay, we're dealing with 12, soon to be 14 farms. We're dealing with about 75 different terroirs. Okay. Subdivided into individual fields. So we're talking probably about 180 individual distillations.
Yeah.
What we could do, and we've thought a lot about this, is we could propagate yeast from each of those farms.
Yeah.
So each farm, it's very simple. You take leaves and you identify in a laboratory what the yeasts are, and you get rid of the ones that are nasty, the ones that are virulent, the ones that are, have bad flavors, and you select the ones that are good, and you develop those and breed those up, and you can create a bespoke yeast. Now, you think again, like Waterford, you think, yeah, great idea. Let's do that. Brilliant. We'll have different. But the reality is, you can't do it with so many variables of origin. It would be a biological nightmare. To separate out all those different yeasts. So no, it's just not practical. What we could do, and we probably will do, when we've got things going, better, is we will propagate a single yeast. So what we're buying at the moment is an off-the-shelf cane appropriate yeast from Lalman. And what it will do for us, once we get the volumes and we know exactly what it is that we need, have the volume that we need, they are quite prepared to help us create a renegade yeast. And we'll do that.
One step at a time, right?
It needs to be one. It needs to be one because, remember, we want the terroir to talk.
Right.
And so I think there's often a misunderstanding, again, about what terroir is. Those flavor compounds in the cane, we want one yeast that's going to transform those flavor compounds into these ones, or move them from here to there. So we want one. We don't want lots of different ones. That sort of starts to negate those influences.
The difference you're trying to see. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We've had.
I mean, here I've got two. These are both from the Hope farm. They are from the Boulders terroir and from the Hope City Terroir.
You know, Mark, this is like a soft form of torture here. You showing us all this without us being able to experience it.
But the thing is just, on the nose, they are just, they are obviously clearly, rum from the same style of distillation.
Right.
But they've got different nuances.
Yeah.
Got different nuances. One is more open, the other one is tighter. One is sort of richer, the other one is it's more spicy. Well, fine. Now, this is the point we're getting at here. I told you it's about building blocks. We have got warehoused away an unprecedented number of component Renegade Rums. Mm-hmm. Each of these is a standalone Renegade Rum.
Right.
Sure. But that's the beginning.
It's how you put the components together.
Is to bring them together.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. That is the whole aim of Renegade Rum. It's the answer to that original question. You have breadth of flavor with rum. How do we get depth of flavor and expansion of flavor? And my very simple philosophy is by identifying those terroir-derived natural flavors and then assembling them together to create the biggest mindfuck possible. So
that's the mission.
One way to put it.
Yeah. So just to be clear here, what we're doing with Renegade, we start with obviously white spirit, white rum. Okay, so that's pre-cast. That's clues in the name. It's before it goes into barrel. So here we have, in this instance, Lake Antoine, Lower Crater Lake. So that's where the soil's richer at the bottom, from the Goat Hill field. Right. So that is one uber specific. This is a spotlight onto. So that's before it goes into barrel. Now we have in barrel. So this is a tune, a study.
Mm-hmm.
So this is sharing with people that terroir precision. It's the farm of New Bacalet. Mm-hmm. This one's from the Upper Coombe. Okay, it's from the Goats Hill field. It's Goats Hill. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
It seems like these releases are not the final destination.
No,
you're showing,
no way.
But you're not waiting to get there before showing people the rum. You're saying, here's the pieces, the building blocks we're creating along the way.
And also keep in mind that
this is because we couldn't help ourselves. We wanted to show you. We wanted to show you what terroir does without wood, so you can see for yourselves what we're talking on about.
Well, this is what rum geeks want. They want to see these pieces.
No,
so,
agreed.
Yeah. This is what happens 2 years later. This is one I made earlier. Mm-hmm. Okay, fine. This is an etude. The clue's in the name. Yeah. It's a study. And this will always be a hyper-focused terroir precision bottling. Yeah. We'll probably release them always in pairs, a compare and contrast. Upper slope, lower slope, column still, pot still. It's for people to share and have fun with.
Different varietals maybe too, yeah.
This is one of the ingredients, okay? Now, if we put those etudes together from within that farm, now we've got upper, lower, middle, north, south, all of these with their different flavor characteristics.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
A symphony.
Now we're starting, now you're starting
symphony is a good way of describing it.
Upon layer of flavor. You're starting to create that complexity. Mm-hmm. You're bringing together the different terroir-defined natural flavors, like a giant sort of millefeuille gâteau. Mm-hmm. Now that first bottling
now I'm hungry,
will be coming out. And this idea it's called the cuvée concept, the concept of the cuvée, bringing together these components. Now that will come out in the end of this summer.
Okay.
All right. The end of this summer.
So we're getting close.
This I said at the beginning. We're starting to. It's happening now. Yeah. Now, after all this gestation, now we're getting that.
That's in the US and the EU, by the way.
Yes,
just for
correct.
people to know. Okay.
Right. So the bringing together of those components to create this complexity of flavor that I've been so eager to find. Now, that's not the end, because in the summer of next year. So, 12, 14 months away?
Mm-hmm.
we then bring the single farms together.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're talking about that potential of 12/14 farms of 75 terroir, 2 distillation techniques, individual, the hundreds. We're talking about an unparalleled coming together of individually obtained flavors. And this is the key to it. It's, some people say, oh, well, that's, you just, it's so what everybody else does. You're just putting all the barrels together and here you go. Well, yes and no.
Because you're curating.
These aren't just any barrels.
Mm-hmm.
These aren't just anything. These are terroir-defined, individually distilled, field by field distillates with their own identities, their own DNAs, each of which is a standalone bottling, and yet we're bringing them together to create this complexity. That's the depth and the expansion and breadth of flavor that we're looking for. So it's not just throw it all together. No, it's you have to build these like an orchestra, as you said.
Exactly.
You build these flavors. You start with the base and you work up. So in a very short order, our players will be on the pitch. We started with white, we started with etude, then we go to single farms.
We're mixing metaphors here all over the place.
Then we go to multi-farm.
We're eclectic.
Yes.
Multi-farm, the Renegade Rum. So if anybody said, well, what is, what's your, it's the Renegade Rum, a multi-farm, multi-terroir, multi-field, bringing together. And of course, what we did discuss earlier was we talked about barley being, sadly, unless you go back to old varieties, very flavor-wise, very, very, very sort of
cane
similar.
is different.
Cane is very different.
Yeah.
And for the simple reason that most of the research in the Caribbean sort of came to an end, wound down, during the 70s and the 80s. And so a lot of the varieties we've got are, and we started with 6 that we tissue cultured to get genetically clean material, because Grenada to us was a blank canvas. It gave us the chance to introduce or reintroduce genetically clean cane, so not disease susceptible. And we chose 6 varieties to see which ones grew best on which terroirs. And of course, that itself is a terroir play. That some grow better on certain places than others. That's a terroir play. So we have, in addition, varietal differences as well. And then, of course, we have distillations. Everything is, we have 2 opportunities. We have that traditional Adams pot still and double retort. Fine, that gives you a weighty texture spirit. Mm-hmm. And I was going to leave it at that until Richard Forsyth, who manufactures these stills for me, and whom I've known for many years, since Brookladdy and Waterford days, he said, I can make you a column still. And I said, no, I don't want one of them.
Yeah.
They produce shit spirit, the silent spirit. That's the volume. I don't need that. And we were sitting here in this very room, and he said, well, actually, you know what? I can make you one that you can batch operate that will give you an extraordinary flexibility of distillation options. So I got really interested. You think, oh yeah, tell me more. And so you need to think of a column still like a clarinet. So you've got lots of different takeoff points. And so we have it in 2 parts. And what we have is we have 8 takeoff points where we can, as the spirit rises through the still, we can take off certain elements at different levels.
Right.
Yeah, okay, that's nothing new there, but we can reintroduce them back into the column, lower down or higher up, or not at all. Mm-hmm. So think of it like a clarinet. So it gives you the ultimate in flexibility to be creative.
And also more scale as well.
Sure. So we haven't started playing tunes yet. We are merely operating it in its batch mode to give us that fruitier spirit alongside a heavier spirit.
The pot still spirit,
Again, with the etude and with the precast, we specify pot still, column still, again, because it's quite fun to experiment between the 2. Mm-hmm. But also to see, if you take one field You take one farm, one terroir, and you distill it 2 ways. Well, okay. Does the terroir still come through?
Right.
You bet. Why wouldn't it? So that
you can bring out different aspects of it, right?
Yeah.
Well, the way we're running it at the moment, it's giving you that fruitier spirit for the simple reason you're distilling it to a higher percent. It's logical, but I want that because I want, first of all, to see what happens.
Right.
How does that portray? And secondly, because really, I want to put those together again to give you different ingredients. Think of it like a chef. If you're at home, you get home and you open the fridge and there's nothing in it. An egg. You go open it. But think of it, you open it up and it's full of all these different. Brilliant. You got things. I'll try this with this. That's what it's about. It's about having options. It's about creativity. It's about not being tied to a mono thing. It's exploring and enjoying the creative, and you can't do it unless you've got them in the warehouse.
Yeah,
it's as simple as that.
Right.
So laying down those ingredients is our ultimate pleasure for Devon to be able to interpret them whichever way we want. If we haven't even talked about wood.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, right. I was gonna mention that. So before we get there, maybe we've talked about all these steps that you've put so much intentionality into to start with, and now there's the element of saying, okay, how do we communicate that to people who are interested in this, especially rum enthusiasts, but everybody who picks up a bottle. And so you made the decision to put a QR code on the back of all those bottles, which has a plethora of information about how the rum was made and all of the stuff that we've really talked about in the decisions. So I wanted to ask you a little bit more about that. At what point did that decision come into play where you thought, boy, we've got a lot to tell people about, and how are we going to do that on the back of a bottle that's this big? And can you talk a little bit more about how you came to that decision?
Sure. There's a number of reasons here. First of all, as I said, there's four parts to Renegade. The pre-cask, we'll carry that on, 1 or 2, that will carry on. People use them in cocktails. They use the temperature. Very interesting in France. When they make cocktails, they tend to put them on ice and build the cocktail in that glass. And of course, ice anesthetizes flavor. So the cocktail, when you take it, tastes of the added bits and pieces, cherries or whatever it is. And then like a time bomb, the rum comes through. Like the final furlong of a race comes charging through. So, playing on that thermal effect, of this extraordinary flavor. Because remember, this is Scottish distillation, French inspiration. That's what we're talking about here. We're not making rum agricole. This is Scottish distillation. This is, a much more robust spirit, but the inspiration is certainly French. That's no doubt. I take my hat off to those guys. Cane is what I want to do. The natural produce,
and the perspiration is everyone who works in a distillery, right?
Yes. Well, in fact, that's a good point. The French have distilled sugarcane because of Lord Nelson blockading Martinique and Guadeloupe during the Napoleonic Wars. They couldn't get the sugarcane back to Europe, so they distilled it. So, that was a happenstance. Adam, the Frenchman, designed the Potsdam double, treble, quadruple, quintuple retorts. It was a French idea. So there's a lot of history here which you can delve into. Well, what we're talking about? We're talking about
the cane code.
What was
the cane code?
The cane code.
The decision as to why.
The cane code is the validation of what we're doing, because as you know, as well as anybody, there is very little transparency. Should we use a polite word? In how rum's made. As I said earlier, anybody can get their blue drums of molasses, and they do. Fine, not a problem. It's easy come, it's easy go. It's a bit like gin. But sugarcane, that's a different story. There's a whole infrastructure as we described. So the cane code on the back of every bottle, here it is up there. You put that into the website, renegaderum.com, and it gives you roughly 15 pages of data that substantiates everything I'm telling you. So you don't have to believe me, because I wouldn't believe anybody in the spirits industry. As I said earlier, it's a marketing industry. The big guys, they'll tell you whatever you want to hear, And 70% or 80% of a whiskey's flavor comes from the barrel. Anything you want to hear. So I have to be able to validate what I'm saying to you. I have to be able to prove what we're doing on the ground. I have to provide an authority so that the consumer can say, okay, I understand what you're doing, and I can see what you're doing. Now, a lot of people probably aren't interested. They just want to drink. Fine, not a problem. So hence this 4-tier project: the white rum, the study, the etudes, the terroir focus, the bringing together of those terroirs into a single farm, the cuvée concept, and then the bringing together of everything, the kitchen sink, to create the Renegade Rum. Now, if someone is going to drink one bottle of rum from us, it's going to be the Renegade Rum.
The final one.
Now, if you turn it round and you want to go down the rabbit hole, you're very welcome.
Okay.
But a lot of guys probably won't even bother. Fine. That complexity that we put in place is for us to know. And it's for you to share if you wish. And if you don't, we'll just drink and enjoy. The purity, the integrity, the honesty, the intensity of these flavors. That's what it's about. So you can engage at whatever level you want, however geeky you want to go.
Yeah.
We'll hold your hand and lead you through. And so you can see where we're going. By all means, share the journey of discovery. And if you want to carry on be geeky, well, we can be pretty geeky too.
You touched on transparency there, and this comes up all the time in interviews we do, conversations. Rum enthusiasts talk about it a lot because it's a big thing, at least in enthusiast circles. Still has a long way to go in more mainstream consumer circles, but there's a growing number of voices among rum producers, rum enthusiasts, advocating for things, more transparency, fewer additives. In some cases, more widely acknowledged production standards and things like that. And I know you have your differences with the way some rums are made. Not the biggest molasses rum fan, it sounds like. That's fine. There's room for everyone. Although I almost passed out when you said making molasses rum is like making gin. But we'll save that argument for another day. But when you kind of look around the rum world right now, and I'm sure you're aware of these transparency conversations, do you see anyone and it feels that you feel a kinship with, or like, yeah, we're kind of fighting a similar fight? How do you look at that?
Well, as I said earlier, I keep my eyes on the road. You have to, in my view. You keep the eyes on the road. I know what we're doing. I know where we've been. I know where we're going. I do not look either way. Blinkered, you can call it. Fine. I know where I'm going. I know what I'm doing. I plow my own furrow.
Figuratively and literally, right?
Because
we can get Mark out in the field for a little bit.
because I think there's too many distractions. There's too many vested interests. There's too many people, different scales and sizes, and they're doing their own thing. And when you meet guys and they come up to you and they tell you what they're doing, and we are fine, great. It's great. I'm not saying I'm not going to talk to anybody, but we know where we're going. And we're not going to be distracted by anything else. And I think you have to have that obstinacy. You have to have that vision. We've got a vision, and we know how we're going to get there. Now, there are obviously the winds of change, or whatever you want to call it. The people are starting to get more. They realize what the problems have been. I mean, when I started, rum has. I don't know how long I've heard it, that rum's going to be the next big thing.
Yeah.
Every trade
this
paper,
year's the year.
Every trade journal. And it's normally the Diageos, the Pernots, the Bacardis. Rum's going to be the next, some marketing manager. It's going to be the next big thing. It's all, and it never happens. And the reason it never happens, in my book, the reason it never does, and the thing is, I can say all this to you because I'm not a rum man. I've come from outside. I can say all this. I feel I can, as an observer from the outside that's opened the door and come in, I feel I have the right to say these things. But, the idea that, I mean, you can't get anybody to agree anything. You see that, in our neighbors, where you got different product. No, I don't mean neighbors here in Grenada. I mean in the Caribbean.
Yeah,
where you got independent bottling brands. You've got domestically produced brands from molasses. There's some people trying to introduce sugarcane or resurrect sugarcane again. There is no uniformity. There is no book. There are no rules. And this has been part of the problem. That idea that rum's going to be the next big thing. Mm-hmm. Well, if you keep, it's that definition of madness, isn't it? that thing of, if you keep banging your head against the same wall, expecting a different, result, that's madness. It ain't going to happen. So if you have this same production values and you keep thinking or wishing that something's going to happen, it isn't until you change your behavior, until you change what you do.
Yeah.
Because what's been going on hasn't worked, has it?
And hopping onto that, I think, sorry, Mark, to interrupt there, but I think we're not chasing a fad. And I think I agree with Mark that we have very strong principles, and those are the guide. It's like our North Star. There's purity, there's flavor, and everything else follows that. And I think, again, we will see whether we're successful once you see the product. And we've gone through the whole pain of creating diversity of expression from the starting point in sugarcane, in every single production step. And that's unparalleled to that degree. Maybe somebody will call it OTT. Maybe we overcomplicate things, but we learn and make our own mistakes. We're not afraid of sharing those. We experiment. And I think that is what makes the strength of this project. And so even within that universe, there is so much we are constantly learning and optimizing. Yeah. So we are somebody said they came to the distillery the other day and they called us a campus. And I think that's not entirely unapt, because it is, as much as it's a distillery, it is also a campus for rum learning to some extent, right? Yeah. And I think one of the guiding principles of Renegade in some ways, at least to me, is education. This ties back in with the transparency aspect. Definitely. That we happen to be riding the wave of a zeitgeist. That's coincidence, maybe a lucky coincidence for us, but it has, what we do is because this is what Renegade considers the right path forward for our exploration of pure flavors derived from terroir. I think. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Well, I'm gonna take 2 minutes out of the 2-hour block here. But just following on with that, and I think, also the cane code, we haven't even got our definitive rum out in the market yet. Right, We've been doing market visits, bringing out the rum over the last year and a half. Every time we sit with people who are trying to consume this product or tasting it for the very first time, I mean, people are baffled. They're blown out of the water by the concept, by the expressions, and that's for us just a starting point. And I mean, that's the exciting bit. We can even present our component parts, and those in and of themselves already are characters, and then think about what we will do once we bring that all together. But it's not just a trend or a fashion that we're following. It's about this intellectual curiosity that we invite people to be part of that exploration. And it is complex, it is fun, it's a bit unorthodox, but it's also the strength of it, because while you rest on tradition, at the same time, if you're beholden to just the tradition, you will never create anything new. And I think that is what we do. It's in the name. Yeah. We go against the stream because we're plowing a new vision. We made
that connection.
And everybody who works in team has a bit of renegade in them.
And of course, the thing about it all, the terroir code, the K code on the back thing, it is because it's a validation, as I said. It's a proof. It's an education. But underneath it all, we've got those terroirs. We know, but nobody else does. And so to have the traceability to prove it to you, we have to do that. We have to be able to prove that those terroirs exist, that we're not just making it up. So, which is our industry's big problem, the over wishful thinking, saying that we do this, but actually you do that. Well, we do terroir and we have to be able to prove it. So we have a data system collecting system, ProTrace, that we designed for Waterford. We've used it for here, which allows us to collect using blockchain all the data right the way through, weather data, soil data, fermentation data, everything, distillation data, and we can share that because that is the validation of what we're doing. Now, the sharing is transparency.
Yeah.
So Terroir without transparency or traceability is nothing. We have to prove it. And so that's why we've gone to the nth degree, whether you're interested in it or not. And remember, rum's for drinking, okay? Rum's for drinking. Let's not forget. But if you're interested to know what's in your glass, how it got there, and the raison d'etre and the philosophy behind it, well, boy, we can give it to you.
Yeah.
You could be in the field. You can hear the sound of the dawn. You can hear the sound of the cutting, of the harvesting. You can hear the birds, the life. Or you can actually immerse yourself as deep as you want.
Yeah.
Or not at all.
As you're sipping a glass of Renegade.
Exactly. I think the larger point you were making about, there needing to be a change for something to actually happen with rum. I don't think you'll get any disagreement from rum enthusiasts about that. I mean, we're talking about that all the time. And I think where the hard part comes in is how different producers interpret what the change needs to be. And I think there's good things that come out of that, and there can be not so good things that come out of that. But as I look more around the space and talk to more people, I think this is our third year doing the podcast now. I think we're reaching an increasing number of people wanting to change things in positive, productive, meaningful ways. And even though you're all kind of doing your own thing, I think there's a growing number of people willing to make more commitments to the category to get the stuff that we know exists
at different
in it,
levels.
At different levels, sure. Yeah. That's what John and I know love about it is there's so many different ways to approach when you say the word rum, you can be talking about, an endless number of different things almost, different flavor profiles, different production methods. So,
well, the fact that no one can even make a classification. I mean, everybody's tried, and no one can agree on that. Again, it's this absurdity that rum is this category that encapsulates. Well, it doesn't even encapsulate molasses. The people in India doing all sorts of things.
Right.
So, what are the values here? Now, what I'm saying to you is, I know what my values are. It's still rum, but this is how I'm doing it. I don't care what anybody else is doing. This is what I'm doing. This is how I think it should be done. And so therefore, yes, there's an arrogance to that. I accept. But you've got to start somewhere, and you've got to have a vision, and you've got to have the courage and the team and the people to put it together. Whether it's the finance, whether it's the implementation, it's a big thing. We do what we believe. We say what we do, and I don't think you can go too far wrong with those sort of values. I think the problem of legislation, the problem of the category, and that happy-go-luckiness. Once, not only is it a huge benefit, but also it's going to be a problem. How are people going to know? How are they going to sort out the bullshitters from the doers? How are they going to sort out that marketing narrative from the reality? Now, we know that the communication today, the ability to see, to find out, to prove whether, if you heard one thing, you can find out if it's true. Oh, we only use sugar. Well, where is it? I can't see it. Things are changing. There is now the ability to challenge those big marketing messages. Yeah. And I think the big guys are a little worried. They don't quite know what to do.
We've seen that play out
and
a lot.
And consumers are more discerning as well.
Right,
it's just part of that ability to check on facts.
Yeah. Right. And we haven't touched on this at all, and because it's not on Renegade's radar in producing, but the added sugar thing in rum, there have been huge changes in how people talk about that. And we've started to see some changes in producer behavior, not enough, but some, because of information sharing, because because of people figuring this out and talking about it and making a ruckus. So all this, the changes we need to see, there's a fight, I feel like, for all of them. And you see that playing out in different ways, whether it's the sugar stuff, whether it's individual countries, trying to come together and make a GI and getting other entities to recognize that. It's going to be a long process, but there's people, approaching it from all different ways.
But you're absolutely right. Who on earth thinks it's normal to add 15 sugar cubes worth to a bottle of rum?
Yeah.
I mean, who honestly think, now, we haven't even talked about wood.
I was going to say, we have to have you all back on to talk about aging at some point. Yeah.
Well, but wood is terribly, terribly important.
Yeah.
And, the Caribbean has been a repository for, the debris where barrels go to die. I know from Brookladdy, from my very costly experiences there to Waterford, to Renegade, there is no shortcut for decent wood. You have to put your hand in your pocket and buy decent wood, which helps with the maturation. It helps with the extractive capabilities, but also provides you with the harmony of a bottling. Because this is something people forget, the harmony of a bottling. When you drink a Renegade rum, you should not taste the wood. Now, that's slightly oxymoronic. You try telling that to an accountant. We're spending all this money on wood precisely so you don't taste it.
Well, but this is an important thing. And when we have conversations, with other rum people all the time, one thing that comes up, particularly with cane juice rums, I hear this a lot, is people will say, I'll talk to people who are huge rum agricole fans, and they'll say, I love rum agricole. I don't like aged releases quite as much, and it's not universal, but there's this idea that the wood can overpower that raw, natural sugarcane vibrancy that you get from the unaged spirit. Yeah. But sometimes you encounter a rum that has done it properly, and the aging, it doesn't just add the taste of wood to the spirit; it brings out other things in the spirit, right? Yes. And so that's what I think rum people want. But
then again, it's quite often it's laziness. People they get some barrels, they fill it up, they put it in a warehouse, and they forget about it. Well, that's not good enough. You've got to curate. You've got to curate, particularly in this climate. If you're going to introduce French oak, which I love, well, the simple fact is that French oak is twice as thick as American oak. So guess what? It's got much more impact.
Yeah.
You've got to keep an eye on it. You've got to see how the spirit is progressing in the barrels. And when the wood starts to dominate, you've got to get it out of there. Virgin oak, we use virgin French, virgin American. That's where quite often the color comes from. The natural lignins, vanillins, and tannins, those two very different oaks. Fine. But, again, you've got to keep an eye on it because, at some point that of extraction, it's complete. Yeah. And you've got to do something about it. And of course, this goes back to those days of independent bottling of rum, and the disillusion that came from it was that you ended up with these whiskies that were woody as can be. They'd been over-aged or poorly matured. No one paid any attention, and it's like chewing a bunch of wood. I do not want to chew wood.
Not a termite.
I learned, as a wine guy, my upbringing was about, we would have Sunday lunch and there would be a decanter of wine on the table, and we kids couldn't start eating until we'd identified what the wine was in the decanter.
Wow.
All right?
It's quite a training.
Okay.
Discipline.
Okay. But it was a question of questions and answers to get there, all right? Okay, so it wasn't like, oh, that's 1945 Mouton Rothschild, am I right? No, it was
like 20 questions.
Of,
yeah.
But extraordinarily good discipline. And I'll never forget, what a discipline that was. I also will never forget how to eat cold Sunday lunch either. But it's that discipline. It's identifying. It's looking for those flavors. When you look at the way the industry is trying to come together, as you said, with geographic indicators. What are they? Inevitably, what happens, like any negotiation, you get people sort of say, well, we want to agree. We want concord.
Make concessions.
So therefore, we're going to capitulate on this. And they end up being worthless. I mean, I looked at the AOC Martinique rules when we first started. We thought, well, the first thing to do is to adopt these. That's somewhere to start. Until you read it through, and it's wonderful French bureaucracies. And it basically means you can do anything. But it's done in such a wonderful way that it's, it sounds like you're going to get the guillotine if you... but actually, there's very little in it because they've tried to accommodate everybody. And, so I mean, think of a GI here. You got one distillery using cane, us using cane. You got one using molasses, one using half and half. How are you going to agree a GI on that? There's a lot of, I think, problems on that.
Right.
You look at Luca and you look at the definitions. How's anybody going to bring this together?
There's no one size fits all solution. I mean, I certainly not. I think GIs can be helpful in the right context. I think there are some places where it doesn't make any sense. We have tons of new distilleries here in the United States, and every now and then I'll hear someone say, "Oh, like maybe we should have an American rum, GI," and what would it be? It would be meaningless right now.
But then also the questions, what purpose are you fulfilling?
Yeah.
Are you trying to help the consumer? Are you trying to keep people from harm? Are you trying to ensure quality?
Or defend.
You can't defend something, right? So I think that is the fundamental question you need to answer first before you arbitrarily just run into some bureaucratic system, essentially. But going back a little bit to what Mark was saying earlier, I think it just happened last week where we had that question of, so how long will you be aging, maturing your stock? And I think Mark's lovely answer was just, I don't know. And that's precisely because it's not formulaic. It's based up on keeping an eye on what is happening, what flavors are developing, and based up on the decision by the team, like let's say Devin and Mark, that is what's going to be driving the process. And I think that's also, again, it goes back to, I mean, I'm just throwing it out there for Crips, but let's say you had some kind of regulation that tells you must age this for this long in this climate.
Right.
But these barrels, you could just say, oh, well, this is what you do. And then by the end of it,
absolutely,
you don't get the diversity or the uniqueness or the interest out of that in the end. I'm not saying that it has no value, but just looking at the production realities on the ground that I've observed now working at the distillery for the last 3 years, there's so many unknowns for us where we go into, and some of them are hypotheses that come true, and then there are lovely surprises that come out. And if we had too much of
define something now?
If we had rule definitions, we have principles that guide us and they go get us to good places. But if there were strict, meticulous little rules, you would be missing out on some of those nuggets.
Well, we could go on. we could go on all day.
I think you have to make this a 3-part.
First of all, like this is what we love. But I want to be.
We just wish we were there with you so we could experience it at the same time. We'll have to take a trip to Grenada soon. Or Grenada.
I wanted to ask one more thing about the aging, and then we'll transition to our kind of our finale of the interview. But I was reading back through the Q&A you did with Matt, I think maybe in 2020, and he asked about if you were going to be selling, any rum third party, and you said no. I noticed on the website now that it looks like there are casks available for purchase. And so I just wanted to ask about what that program looks like and also why you decided to make some available for people to buy.
Well, yes, cash flow.
Yeah.
It's in its early phase of building a brand. We wanted a revenue stream so that we weren't obliged to compromise the quality of what we're doing by trying to bring something to market too soon.
Yeah.
So it's a hedge against that. So a company called Cask Trade in London, who are cask whiskey and rum specialists, we give them a number of casks, a number of different terroir, a number of different farms to sell to individuals who would like to have their own barrel, would like to have it, their own label, or who ideally sell it back to us, when we really need it in the years to come.
Got it.
So it's a necessity. It's a financing necessity.
Sure.
And to spread the word, to show what we're doing, so people can see the very different things that we're doing. This is an oak that we've used, which comes from Colombia, and it's very high in eucalyptoids.
Is this the Andean oak?
So menthol. Yeah, which is absolutely intriguing. Which I can smell and you can't.
I know. We're trying to smell it through the screen.
Would you like to? Yeah.
There we go. Yeah.
You get that menthol flavor?
I do. Yeah, the menthol is really hitting me. Yeah.
We're not seeking a uniformity of outcome.
Yeah.
On the contrary, we're rejoicing in individuality and our creative abilities. Devon, who is an absolute wonderful, wonderful man, and I wish he was here. He's actually over in Ireland at the moment at Water. When I first came across him, and I explained what we were doing, and you could see the eyes light up, and think, this is what he's always wanted to do. To create this huge, great play park.
Right.
And I've put it all there. All the toys are there for him to play with. And, that's this Renegade project. It's bringing together all these renegades, all these different people, none of whom perhaps really envisaged exactly what was going to happen. But we brought them all together, and, including his distilling team. I'm really proud. An all-female distilling team.
I saw the articles that came out recently.
Girls that would have left the island. That's the reality. They'd have gone with their degrees. They'd have gone away. They'd have probably gone to America. They would have left, and their families and the schools. This is what I derive a lot of pleasure from, and it's completely incalculable. But it's the empowerment of these young lads who are unemployed, who are now mill engineers. They're the boiler engineers. They're distillers. They're warehouse keepers. The young ladies who run our distilling team, these people that would have left or been unemployed, and to see how that changes the economy, the local economy. People buy a car, and because that's very satisfying. And I always use Bruichladdich as an example of this. That one of my greatest satisfactions with Bruichladdich, not just seeing it around the world, not seeing botanist gin advertised at halftime at the Super Bowl or whatever, these things that I created. That's obviously a huge pride. But the biggest is a 17-year-old lad that came to see me back in 2000. And he said, "Have you got a job?" And I said, "What can you do?" He said, "Well, I can paint the wall." I said, "Well, can you paint that wall? When you finish that, can you paint that one and then that one?"
And maybe take care of the crack in my window, right?
23 years later, he's the distillery manager.
Wow.
He's married. He's got a local girl. He's got 2 kids. The school stays open. That is what it means to me. I mean, that's part of our mission, part of our journey, is to bring people with us and show them what really can happen. I'm not saying it's what everybody should do or whatever. It's certainly not. But this is what we do, and we're very happy to share it. There's no holds barred, warts and all. We the door's open, and when we cock it up, we're quite happy to admit it. And I think it's that honesty, which perhaps you guys may say, well, it's OCD, it's like over the top and compulsive, But I think that, there's a reason for it, because we believe it. And I think that's very easy when you can share it with people, because there's nothing to hide. That's the point. There's nothing to hide. It's open book.
I think the message I'm hearing there that you said is the doors are open. So anyone listening, if you're going to Grenada anytime soon, call up Jane, call up Mark, go by, see it all in person.
Go to our website.
Yeah,
go to our website.
Yeah, actually, I as a rum consumer, I really do appreciate the amount of information available on the website. It does give you kind of a great behind the scenes feel. So we'll put links up in the show notes to all of that. Thank you both so much for what's that?
YouTube channel. The YouTube.
YouTube.
We've got a YouTube channel. And there, there's little vignettes, little films about certain aspects of what we've been doing, and we add to it all the time. But also, if you delve back, you'll find some of the very beginning coverage. Some of the trials and tribulations that we've described during this talk. It's there on video.
All the mistakes right there for you to view. Huh?
It's like the bloopers.
you can feel the blood, the sweat, and the tears. It's all there, man.
There's there's a bunch of articles on the website, and one we won't get into it now, but I know there are people listening who have looked at the cane code and have been like, where's the ester count information? You have an article. You have an article about this. I didn't.
Don't open up a can of worms.
I didn't feel the need to bring it up because it's already written out. Why? So we'll put a link up in the show notes to why ester counts are not part of Renegade's thing.
Have us back for another conversation.
Yeah, that's right. We'll need a lunch break if we go there. So
please, let me at it.
Mark's champing at the bit.
He's ready. He's ready to go.
Before we go, we have one final thing, and I know this interview has been about big, expansive answers, which we love. That's why we do the show.
Yes.
It thrills us when we have a 2 hour and 50-minute interview. That's what we live for. But the final segment of the show, it's a tradition. I know you're not a fan of tradition always, but I hope that you'll like this one. It's called the rapid fire round of questions. We put about a minute on the clock, and the goal is quick, short answers as quickly as possible. John is the curator of this segment.
That's right.
He's
we cuvee this. Yes.
It's a cuvee of questions.
Who's this addressed to? It's Jade, do you want to answer these?
Oh.
So here's
I'm ready to rapid fire.
Okay.
But yeah, good luck to Mark.
Here's a thought. I have the first few that I think are very quick this or that answers you both can do, and then I'm going to address each one of you for the rest of them. It'll go pretty quick. As long as we keep it quick here, and we'll go for short answers, and there's no wrong answers. Whatever you want to do, show your personality. And we have an unreliable timekeeper anyway, so
yeah. I can be very generous as a timekeeper. John, who are you going to start with? Are you going to start with Mark or Jane?
We're going to do the first 4 is going to be for both of you. Okay. So I'm going to ask for both of you to respond quick answers for those, and then I'll address each one after that.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Going to start the clock and go.
All right. Neat or on the rocks? How do you want your rum?
Neat.
Both neat. All right. Column, pot, or blend? What's your preference?
Either.
And Jane?
Thinking of my favorites so far. Pot.
Okay. Aged or unaged rum?
Unaged.
Aged.
Ooh, I like the difference there.
I'm going to ask this one for completeness sake because we ask everybody, but I know the answer. Molasses or cane juice?
Go figure. Yeah.
Appropriate. All right, Mark. Mark, can we expect to see Renegade Rum aged in casks that previously held Bruichladdich or Waterford whiskey?
Probably not.
Okay. How about wine?
Well, French oak inevitably is wine. But it's not the wine that's relevant. It's the quality of the oak.
All right. Jane, Renegade's Rum's logo includes the 2 R's in a very creative way, and I know Mark's last name also starts with R, so it seems to be a theme. So I wanted to say, would you rather have a Renegade Rum spokesperson be one of the following? Rama Rao Jr., who is the star of the new Oscar-nominated Bollywood hit movie RRR, or Game of Thrones author George R.R. Martin, or it could be LeVar Burton, beloved host of the Americans' children TV program Reading Railroad, or maybe Robert Redford. Do you have a choice there?
Or Rolls-Royce.
Martin, if he ever managed to finish the final book.
Yes. Finish Winds of Winter. Come on.
And I heard Mark also pitch in there with Rolls-Royce. Nice one.
Rolls-Royce.
All right. Mark, your favorite person to talk about making rum with?
Devon.
Okay, that made sense. We have to have Devon on the show at some point.
Yes.
Jane, what rum distillery comes to mind, not in Grenada, that you think to yourself, yeah, they're doing really good things there?
Ooh, that's mean.
That is mean.
That's unfair. That's unfair.
You
That
guys
is
can
unfair,
jump in,
yeah.
either one of you, if you want.
I don't think I can pick one.
That's a
rum
diplomatic
distillery.
answer. Well done.
No. But I'm not. But I will say rum region, and I think Martinique I have a big heart for.
Okay,
Makes sense.
all right. Mark, the best whiskey for rum drinkers.
Oh, well, Waterford, of course.
I knew you were. I had a feeling. And what about this?
man.
What's the best rum for whiskey drinkers?
Well,
You better say Renegade. I mean, obviously.
I don't know any. Yeah.
All right. Jane, any truth to the rumor that one of the cane codes on a random bottle of Renegade actually makes you the winner of a secret contest for an all-expenses paid trip to Renegade Rum Distillery and free rum for life?
You're setting us up.
You compared yourself to Willy Wonka earlier.
I was going to say, that is the plot of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, so I figured I might as well ask.
We could try this. You'll never know.
It's out there somewhere.
There is something there which we're working on, but that's
Oh, so there might be a grain of truth in there. All right. We'll look forward to that. Mark, finally, we talked about the term pre-cask for your current unaged releases, and we know your cask-aged releases are coming soon. In the future, if I bought a cask and I've fully imbibed one of those releases, am I allowed to then refer to that rum as post-cask?
Yeah, exactly. Post-traumatic.
That's
all right,
time.
great.
You made it
Awesome.
to the end. Well done. Very
Awesome.
good. Very
Thank you
good.
guys
Both
Thank
of
you all
much.
so
Thanks for
much. That
bearing
was
with
fun.
All right.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yes. Thank you again. Marathon interview. Great stuff.
Yeah.
Everyone, we'll put links up to the show notes. You can check out everything we've talked about. And yes, thank you both for being here. We appreciate it.
Awesome. We hope to make it to Grenada soon.
But thank you very much. But we will be coming to you.
Oh, when will you be
is
here?
The important thing. Yeah, we will be coming to you. So all spring we got various things happening. So the etude is arriving in the States. Which it's arrived. It's now there. So it will start to filter out. There's not much of the first.
Has to get through our lovely distribution system.
Yeah.
Now, right?
Yeah. Tell me about it.
So there's not much. The first two. The next two etudes are being bottled at the moment.
Okay.
And they'll be there in the summer. And then, of course, the single farms will be coming,
Yes.
two of them in the autumn. So these are starting to come through. But at the moment, it's going to be, slowly, gently, and we're just going to build it up.
Yeah.
So keep an eye out for it and enjoy it when you see it. I mean, and let us know what you think.
Yeah.
As I said, this is how I think it. This is my vision. This is like we're very happy to hear what other people think, and I'm sure, and I hope we haven't upset anybody. I'm sure we probably have. It's not intentional, and I hope there's no miscommunication, misunderstanding. It's been a pleasure to speak with you guys about what we're doing and sharing it. And what I really, really long for is the chance to share a dram or a drum, as we're calling it, with you in the future. So cheers. And thanks very much for letting us explain Renegade to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thanks so much for listening to another episode of the Rumcast. If you'd like to learn more about Renegade Rum and everything they're doing, we'll put a link up to their website in the show notes, as we mentioned during the interview. Very informative, lots of articles, lots of details on their rums, the distillery, the cane fields, all that good stuff. So check it out. You'll find a ton of information there. If you want to share your thoughts with us on the episode, if you have questions, suggestions for anything for us to cover in the future, you can always reach us via email, host@rumcast.com. That's HOST@rumcast.com. Or you can send us comments, messages on social media. So we are at the Rumcast on Facebook and Instagram, Twitter as well. And last but not least, if you'd like to get some extra Rumcast episodes, join us for some online happy hours, that kind of thing, you can support the show and get in on all of that at patreon.com/therumcast. That's patreon.com/therumcast. And yeah, thanks again for listening, and we will see you next time.